today with icon femme phenon, Dr. Nan Wise. She has pioneered pushing the work around pleasure, the brain, sexual health, and more. Welcome, Nan.
Thank you for having me, Natalie. I'm so excited about our conversation.
Well, I am thrilled. This area is so important, and what we can do to shift the mindset and the consciousness that pleasure is not something that is a gift or a luxury. It's actually necessary for our health, our physical health, our mental health. And so, share a little bit because I would imagine when you started into this field, I look at it now and it's an uphill battle. People don't necessarily fully value it, they poo poo it, they're critical of it. So, tell me, how did you get in this field and how do you continue to stay motivated to keep pushing?
Well, this has been for me a personal as well as a professional journey, Natalie, because I write in my book, Why Good Sex Matters, about my own challenges with anxiety. And anybody who suffers from anxiety will tell you it's not exactly conducive to pleasure in or out of the bedroom. And I love that you started with this notion that pleasure is not a luxury, it's a necessity for a well-functioning emotional brain, a well-functioning body, and all of that. And right now, what we're seeing in the extreme political climate about the basically the patriarchy is telling women what they can do with their bodies, and this is nothing new. So, as a young
Right.
clinician, straight out of social work school in the 80s, I was keen on asking everybody, whoever I dealt with. I always said, when I'm collecting information to do work with them, I always ask them about their sex lives, because being a kid coming into my teenage years after like the 60s and sexual liberation and women's rights, it was right up front there. And it was something I thought a lot about. I always incorporated the idea of asking people about their relationship with their sexuality and their pleasure as being a very key component to being an embodied, healthy human being. So as I was navigating, trying to get some tools for myself, because really what I teach people is that the brain depends on two signals. This is my work as a neuroscience researcher: pain and pleasure. Pain is what kind of gets us to avoid things. Pleasure is when it's working well, when we're in what I call healthy hedonism, things that feel good and are good for us, moving towards things that will be good for us, beneficial, that will ensure not only our survival, but our ability to thrive. So I did social work while I was raising my kids, worked a lot with, people in relationships, people with LGBTQRST, everybody and everyone. And when my kids moved out, when they kind of went and did their own thing, I went back to grad school because I could, to study the brain. And that came around the same time, right after I trained as a sex therapist. I had lunch with Dr. Beverly Whipple. And if you don't know anything about Beverly's work, she is the woman who named the G-spot. She's the woman who normalized studying sex. When she was a nurse and people had heart attacks, nobody even knew what to tell the people about. Could they have sex? People didn't deal with sex in medicine. So I went to grad school, and at the tender age of 50, so it's never too late to go back to grad school and study what you love. And I did research on how the brain responds to sexual pleasure, whether it's imagined or actual stimulation, all the way up to orgasm. And what I found out, and I'll give you this sort of like main point here for this whole session, is our brain minds are a pharmacy. It's a medicine cabinet. How we think, what we focus on, what we experience all affects the chemistry. And if you want to have a better sex life, what you can do is connect with being in your body as a place of pleasure. And that can be challenging as we go through our lifespan. So I studied, sex and pleasure across the lifespan.
Yeah.
And with women who are entering, sort of premenopause, postmenopause, menopause stuff, the body sometimes becomes a place of pain. So we have symptoms, we have, discomfort, we can feel out of sorts physically and emotionally. So what I always say to people as they transition that, it's a temporary state. Our bodies adapt to the changes, being in connection with ourselves, having a very good relationship, shrinking the inner critic that tells us we're too fat, we're too old, we're all of this other stuff. I think, what the main, and I'm sorry, I'm just so excited about this topic.
Is great. Absolutely.
I think the main obstacle for women as they navigate menopause is not so much our chemistry or our hormones or the body changes. It's living in a culture that teaches us that old equals ugly, unattractive, that there's an expiration on the sex life of women. And I'm here to tell you, at the tender age of I'm 68 now, you can have a wonderful sex life as your body adjusts to the changes that it goes through, through the premenopause and menopause and postmenopause years. Not only can you have a big lust for life, you can get into a relationship with yourself that's so much more empowering, so much more prioritizing our pleasure. So I like to tell people, if you want to have a good sex life, maybe just consider finding ways to get turned on by life, which is a little challenging right now.
But it can be challenging.
And when we're connecting with other people, when we're actually, one of the nice things that's happening as a result of the political climate is people are getting out and they're connecting more in real life. So if you get off your phones and you start to hang out IRL, in real life, what the kids call it, IRL. You will feel better. You will be more enlivened. So what I learned from the women who came to my lab and donated orgasms to science, no easy feat.
No easy feat.
No easy. Can you imagine being in a full body scanner, having to keep your head really still, because if your head moves, your brain data is not going to be of any use to anybody, and to be able to actually stimulate their clitoris to orgasm, or even more, with more of a challenge, a partner reaching in to stimulate the clitoris to orgasm, no easy feat. But you know what they all told me? They all said the same thing. I interviewed them. They were between the ages of 24 and 74. Yeah. And these were women that were very confident in their ability to experience orgasm. Right. And they all told me the same thing. They learned to love their bodies from inside out. And many of them had challenges. They had histories of sexual abuse. They had problems initially finding their orgasm. So it wasn't like these people were just highly sexed and were so talented. These were women that made a conscious journey to claim their pleasure, to claim their bodies as a place of pleasure for them. Wow. So it's something that's more important now than ever.
Ever. Well, and just in what you shared, my brain's popping to a whole bunch of different topics. I love the brain is a pharmacy. That statement is so powerful. And for people to get it and understand, not even from a pleasure perspective, but everything. So if you understand your brain as a pharmacy, I'm in control of how I perceive this situation and what chemicals my brain is going to release because of that. That is such a game changer for people's well-being, physical health,
everything.
That is so empowering and impactful.
And what I had to learn myself, because I had childhood trauma, which I didn't really quite unpack until I was an adult. But I had panic attacks starting in my early 20s that were really, really challenging. And what I needed to learn was basically how the brain mind works. So I've been a pioneer in what's known as the field of affective neuroscience, the study of emotions. I have had the pleasure and privilege of briefly working with its founder, Dr. Jaak Panksepp. And in my book, Why Good Sex Matters, I talk about the 3-level brain. So the oldest part of our brain has wired in emotional instinct circuits that we share with pretty much all other mammals and many other animals. So it's not always possible to think yourself out of a bad mood or think yourself out of an anxiety attack.
Right.
Because the top mind is not always able to steer us in the right direction when we have a very imbalanced or inflamed emotional brain. So my book, Why Good Sex Matters, talks about the 7 wired in emotional systems when we know how they work and how we can work with them, how we can work with our bodies to recognize what's out of balance for us. Like for me, I had a high level of panic, grief, sadness. That's a wired in system that caused me to be very anxious. And all the psychotherapy in the world did not do the trick back in the day. Once I learned how to be able to do yoga, to work with my breath, to be able to acknowledge and work with the sensations in my body, I didn't have panic attacks anymore because I was able to tolerate the big feelings that I had in my body and to work with that to be able to calm my nervous system enough to the point where, guess what? I got so good at calming my nervous system, I was able to go on the Today Show without even being anxious the week that New York shut down. And here I used to be a person who could have public speaking anxiety in a room by myself, just thinking about giving a public, giving a talk. So we can work with our nervous systems to get into that more restorative place, which then we can use the brain mind to focus on suggestions about how we can, be connected, to feel safe, to feel calm, to feel secure, to get playful, joyful, even in these challenging times. Especially now, we need to be able to access our capacity for pleasure and for play so that we can be resilient, resourceful.
So when we hit perimenopause, and you touched on it, there's all these things going as our hormones are on this roller coaster. So mood swings, brain fog, let alone the physical pain and discomfort in our vaginal vulva areas, low libido. What are some of the common barriers or challenges you hear with your clients to sort of help women feel like they're not alone?
Well, first of all, getting into a good community of people and reading. There's some wonderful books. Dr. Jessica Shepard has Generation M. She's a dear. In fact, I met her on the Today Show. That's where we met.
Oh, did you? She's fantastic.
She's fantastic.
She's a Canadian too.
I love that. So, but one of the things that we realize is that we don't have to go through and suffer. Now, they've shown that hormone replacement therapy is safe. There are menopause-trained OBGYNs, people who can really make sure that they can help you deal with, so you don't have to suffer so much.
Right.
So, we've really come into the age of being able to help people navigate that so that then eventually what happens is our bodies do adapt to the different levels of hormones. And if we learn, for example, that it's, for example, for women, one of the big complaints that women have is they feel like they lose their active sexual desire.
Yeah.
So they feel broken. But one of my other friends, Kelly Kasperson, who's a urologist, wrote a great book, We're Not Broken, Yeah. And the truth of the matter is that women and men are a little bit different when it comes to our sexuality. I mean, there's individual differences that may trump the gender, or actually it's the biological. Gender's a construct. Yeah. Biology is really key here because For men, they tend to have higher levels of what's called active sexual desire. They're horny and they know it across the
Mm-hmm.
lifespan.
Right.
Women are desire comes in different sizes and not just, no desire or big desire. We have something called responsive desire. I'm sure you've heard about that, which
Yeah.
kicks in when we feel like turned on by our partner, turned on by life. So we don't have to sit around and wait to feel horny to have a great sex life. And I'll tell you
Yeah.
also something. Having sexual stimulation increases testosterone. So testosterone is the main hormone that mediates sexual desire in both sexes.
Mm-hmm.
So when we actually do have sexual stimulation leading up to orgasm, often that releases testosterone. So for women who have like kind of a regular practice to kind of jumpstart the engine, for them, not for the partner, for
No,
them.
for them.
Because we know how good sex is for the brain and the body. It's a stress buster. It's so good for first of all, I did a study that showed that when we have sexual stimulation leading into orgasm and activates so many different regions of the brain, it's better workout for the brain than exercise or crossword puzzles. So
I'm going to share the link to that study because I heard you speaking about that study and I was just floored by like there's knowing and then there's seeing.
You see the brain light. And talk about the brain being the most important sex organ. In my study, the first thing I had my participants do before they actually stimulated their clitorises or had their clitorises stimulated, I had them think about having a dildo inserted in a way that was pleasurable. And I compared the brain activity when they were just imagining having a speculum put in, which is not particularly a turn on for women. A pelvic exam. And I even asked my subjects afterwards, did you get turned on? Nobody got turned on by the speculum imagery. Just imagining pleasurable sexual stimulation lit up and activated many of the same regions that orgasm did. So, here it is. We don't have to have a quiet mind to have sexual pleasure, but our mind has to be on the sensations. If we're thinking about laundry or the politics or anything that's going to be, or thinking about resentments, for our partners, we're not going to be present. Yeah. So it's bringing our attention to the sensations and really grounding ourselves with paying attention to our bodies. It's necessary for sexual pleasure in the bedroom, but it's also necessary for a well-balanced emotional brain because the body is where the sensations of emotion show up that we need to pay attention to. And if we're not paying attention to the emotions as they're showing up, we're not going to be able to navigate the changes that we might need to make. Another one of my dear friends, Dr. Pooja Lakshman, who did her postdoc in my lab, she's a psychiatrist. She wrote a book called Real Self-Care. And what she talks about, it's not getting manicures or facials or anything. It's making the hard choices that we as women have to make to prioritize ourselves, to learn to have good boundaries, to listen to the information when we're getting depleted. Absolutely. And when we're depleted, we aren't doing ourselves any favors. We really need to be so attuned to our own selves, putting those oxygen masks on us before anybody else, and also realizing it's not our job to take care of everybody and everything all the time, to have more balance in our lives that prioritizes ourselves and our pleasures. Even as we become parents, now I have 5 grandchildren, so there's a lot of bids for attention in my life for my energy, and I need to prioritize me.
Absolutely. Well, and when you do that, you present and show up as a better grandma, parent, than when you don't. And I definitely learned that early. And, I think women can be hardest on each other instead of supportive in that and sort of feed into these notions of what's selfish behavior. versus self-care. And my hope is that women continue to pull together and support each other in this space versus sort of feeding into this discourse of it being selfish. And I love how you talk about pleasure. I mean, orgasm is absolutely a fantastic pleasurable experience, but there's pleasure along that way, and it doesn't necessarily have to lead to an orgasm in
No,
order
it
for you to
doesn't.
say I had a great sexual encounter.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of women that cannot have an orgasm with their partner or struggle to, just sort of taking that pressure off for them, that there are other ways to experience orgasm, there are other ways to get there, and it's all in the spirit of fun and pleasure. And let's not be so serious. Let's go back to being a bit like kids and not caring what people think and just having fun.
That's exactly what I prescribe to my patients. So there's 7 core emotional systems. The first is the one that works with all other systems, which is called the seeking system. It's powered by dopamine. And we know what's happening to our dopamine. It's getting hijacked by social media and how we're using our attention, which is why young people are having a hard time with sex. Here's one belief that older people are sexually inert. Actually, recent data shows that older people, and I'm talking to people in their 60s and 70s, are actually having more sex than the younger people in their 30s and 40s. Yeah. So it's kind of like this whole idea that our sex lives has to dry up is really it's a falsehood.
Well, and if I can interrupt just on that point that you made, and that I think it adds value, that I was talking to Dr. Millhouse. She's a fantastic physician in the U.S., and she was saying, urologist, and she was saying that she's seeing a lot of prescriptions for ED medications with the younger men because of this dopamine issue that you just mentioned. So, I think it's really important to be mindful of that.
So the seeking system is powered by dopamine, and it's designed to help us pursue our needs and also protect ourselves. So we have the fear circuitry. If it's on too much of the time, we'll shut down the sex life, shut down our lust systems. The lust system is wired in. If you don't feel safe, anybody who's had sexual trauma is going to have a hard time with this. Anybody who's worried about their physical or emotional safety is not going to have access to their pleasure systems. So
how sensitive is this? Because there's trauma, and then there's just the notion of kind of feeling safe and confident in love with your partner.
That's a great question. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, we have to think about that. Anything that's going to condition us to have a fear. So it doesn't have to be a fear in the sense of for our lives. But if we aren't feeling safe, if we're not feeling comfortable, that registers very strong in the second part of our minds, which is the learning mind. And so much of that is automatic that we may not even be aware of the circumstances that are triggering us to feel fear. Fear conditioning is very, very robust. So it's something that we really need to learn how to be able to, if we've had traumas, big or little, to learn how to practice feeling safe in the moment. So we can learn to breathe and feel safe in the moment. We can take the nervous system down from fight or flight, and we can strengthen the parasympathetic, responsive, restorative nervous system, which then gives us access to play. That's a very important system. Care for ourselves, play, and lust for life, lust for connection. So that's, like I always say, what happens is over time, you ask, why does this happen more in middle age as well? It's not just hormones. It's we accumulate experiences and stress over time that weighs us down with all of this tension and like kind of like a nervous system that's a little bit more nervous than it needs to be. Over time, what happens is we get conditioned to have very active flight or fight systems that really contribute to our lifestyle diseases, to all diseases, coronary, cardiovascular, all of that stuff. Inflammation, which we know now plays a big role in cancer and
Huge.
aging and all of that. So it's in our own best interest to reboot our nervous systems, to get present, to feel safe in the moment, and to think about sex as a playground for grown-ups, that it
Yes.
doesn't have to include, let's say you're not particularly comfortable because you're going through perimenopause or menopause, you're not really up for having intercourse. Maybe you just can be finding ways to have pleasure in your body with your partner. So we need to expand the concept of sex into a much bigger playground that doesn't have to look like orgasms or intercourse or anything in particular. It can be connection with ourselves and each other.
Yeah. Well, and I saw an interview with Matthew McConaughey, and he said that one of the secrets to their marriage is having a queen bed. He said, get rid of that king bed. And so we joke at home because we have some practices that just, you get bored, you're in a bed, you don't have clothes on, stuff happens, right? And so it's that kind of mindset of just playing, even taking sex off the table as sort of that's the objective. I think we get so conditioned that it's about sex instead of it's just about having fun and playing with your partner like you were when you were a kid.
Yeah. And for people to get there, Natalie, a lot of my couples who've lost the thread to their sex lives, whether it's across, months or some people even to decades, what I really stress is the connection, the having practices on a regular basis, that we climb into each other's experiences, that we realize that we're always changing, we're always having experiences. So the connection being updated every day in learning, like, what's the high point of your partner's day? What was their low point? What are their wishes, fears, and dreams? That can get us more into connection. I also teach things from Tantra, like eye gazing, breathing, being in our bodies, kind of tuning into the body channel. And once we get in the body channel, we're much more likely to notice subtle sensations that can lead us into more of like seeking connection and play. We got to get out of our heads.
Well, and so for those women out there who, because I hear this a lot, it's like they've just been on this trajectory of having kids, working head down. Everyone's tired. Everyone's burnt out. They don't really like their partner too much. Is there hope for them to spark or renew of their sexual awakening of love and lust and pleasure for them?
Absolutely. Now, I will tell you, there's nobody who's ever been married for any length of time that hasn't developed resentments towards their partners. And very often the things that we resent in our partners are things that we don't understand how they see the world differently. So what I do with my clients is I help them see that in that resentment energy, in that even the turn-off energy, is a lot of potential for being authentic and real. Like recognizing a lot of what we resent is that people, they see things differently. If we understand...
God damn it. Everybody should see things the same way as me.
Well, there's five basic domains I help my clients unpack to understand how they might see the world differently. So some people are more about togetherness first. Some people are more about separateness first. And they're both completely valid ways to be. But if you are a togetherness person who has a partner who's separateness, you're going to think that they're selfish, they're this, that, or the other thing, rather than just understanding that they have different ways to operate and that you can build bridges between those differences.
Yeah.
And I also, when I was training years ago in Gestalt therapy, the first body-based, I did a lot of trainings so that I'd have tools on my tool belt to work on myself and share with other people. When
Amazing.
we recognize that if we share our resentments with our partners and we say, I resent you for whatever they said or they did, that can be a connection. I resent you for what they said or did. But what we also need to remember is a lot of it is our interpretation. If you say, I resent you for being selfish, what does that mean? What did they say? What did they do? And a lot of times, if you get people to unpack it, they end up recognizing that we're doing a lot of interpreting our partner's actions in a way that may not be very accurate to their intentions. And then we're also building these sort of like walls between us. And it's just not fun. After a while, it gets lonely. We're not practicing good. All of my couples who I work with for couples therapy, it's more like coaching. I share with them what science has shown that makes people effective partners. And guess what? It's skills and tools. Yeah, you get chemistry in the beginning of a relationship if you're lucky. You have new relationship energy and stuff like that. But you habituate to that. And if you don't have the skills to build your friendship and build your a positive connection with your partner, you're going to run out of steam and you're going to go, oh, I'm not in love anymore. If I had one penny for every time somebody tells me that, I'd be a rich woman.
Well,
What they're saying is that they're not in lust anymore. And they're also not working in a way to get to know what are they showing up that's making that relationship stall. How are they behaving that's stalling that relationship?
Right. Well, and I see this in so many different avenues. We have gotten to a spot where we all just want a quick fix for everything. And that accountability and understanding that we have to do some work.
And the work can be play.
It can be fun.
It can be fun.
But effort
connection
is required.
It takes a focus. What we're short of now is attention. Attention has gotten so commodified and so disrupted. We're in this state of continuous partial attention that has run our nervous systems over the edge, which is why we're seeing all this craziness in the big picture. People are so judgmental. They're so angry. They're so dysregulated.
Yes.
Because we're not using our wired in emotions in the way that they're supposed to. It's supposed to be we're hanging out with people face to face, flesh to flesh. Young people don't even talk on the phone anymore. I have couples who tell me that they conduct these whole relationship things by text, and I'm like, no.
You can be sexy sometimes.
No, we're talking about they're fighting over texts.
Oh, yeah.
They're having their relationship breakdowns over text, and they're not listening to each other.
Yeah.
When we hear a person's voice, there's a whole branch of the vagus nerve, which you probably have heard of, the social vagus, that can downregulate the nervous system's alarm centers. And when we hear a voice, there's so much more information in it about the intention, the emotion of the person who's speaking, communicating 100%. With us. The young people, Gen Z, who grew up on phones, they are so anxious. I call them, with deep love, Gen crazy, because they have so much trouble. And older people now, in some ways, are an advantage over the younger people, which is why I think our sex lives are better than some of the younger people. We understand that when you're in the room with somebody, you ought to be looking at them and talking to them.
Yeah.
We understand the value of real connection, of real physical being in the space, instead of sitting there on our phones, although older people can do that too, rather than, being in the room with somebody.
So I'm very curious about curiosity, and I feel like if we all applied a curiosity lens to everything right now, it would really serve our society, our relationships, and our health very, very well. And I want to do something in this space. I don't know what it looks like yet. But if we all shifted to a curiosity mindset and engaged with an actual genuine desire to understand the why are you thinking that? Why are you saying that? Do I have the whole picture on this? Instead of these rash judgments about they're wrong, that's good, that's bad. We are not binary. We have gray lives, and we've lost that completely as a society. And to your point, people are angry, they're rash, they're putting people in categories and not connecting at a deep level.
I have been thinking about this and talking about this with other people about how we need to bridge the gap between the divide. What we need to do is to quiet our rage. Rage is a system that's wired in, and panic, grief, sadness, I mentioned, and fear. Those three systems are basically what we call the negative emotions because they don't feel good. In fact, when they stimulate those centers in animals, they'll work to turn off the stimulation. They vote with their paws and says, this doesn't feel good. So one of the things that we need to do, the curiosity, the seeking system is the source of our motivation, our enthusiasm, our curiosity. If we can kind of learn what people need to do in relationship is to give each other the benefit of the doubt. Mm-hmm. The rush to judgment is really toxic to our own nervous systems because we'll be flooding with adrenaline. We need to stay off social media because Loretta Ross is an activist that talks about calling in rather than calling out. We're also quick to call each other out. Calling out makes sense when you're dealing with public figures and politicians who have so much power. But if we're dealing with each other, calling in is starting with what do we agree on? What do we?
Right.
And so the majority of Americans believe that women should have rights to reproduction. The majority of us believe that there should be gun control. There's more people in agreement to the natural path of citizenship than what you would see in social media. But we also, if you think about community, community is being connected with people that you get to know. We've gotten divorced from community in real life, like our neighbors, our towns. So one of the things that my colleagues who are really struggling with and with having, being faced with misogyny and faced with racism and all this other stuff, what they're saying is if you foster 100%. An egalitarian relationship in your own home, and then you work with people in your community so that you have each other's backs. Go volunteer. Go do things that will help people feel connection. And that we will, from the, grassroots up, be in a space that's much better for all of us.
But when you look at other healthcare professionals, what kind of advice could you maybe give them if they don't have expertise like you have, when they're seeing patients or hearing what are some cues that they could look for and how they could help women in this space?
So the first thing I would really encourage my colleagues to do is to get comfortable asking their patients about their sex lives. So you don't have to be a sex therapist. In fact, I've taught a lot of people who aren't sex therapists how to deal with some of the, typical things that you'll, come up against when you deal with people about their sexuality. But I think even a more, global lens is to dig into, is this person able to experience pleasure? What gives them pleasure? Are they having any pleasure? And if they're not, talk to them to educate them about how important it is to be able to find things that give them pleasure, that it's not a luxury, it's a necessity for a well-functioning body and mind, and that we need to really combat stress. So kind of looking at that relationship between the kind of stress that we're experiencing in our lives and how that plays into anhedonia, or the inability to experience satisfying pleasures in and out of the bedroom, and really help the people recognize that they can make some important, small, but very powerful changes in eliminating some of the stress in their lives. So I said something about taking a walk outside,
Yeah.
light into your eye, to the retina, to the hypothalamus, learning how to breathe well. There's something called screen apnea. We spend so much time on our phones or on our computers, and we're not breathing properly. So by being able to, I work with everybody who comes into my practice one way or the other, getting them to remember they have a body and your body is breathing, and you can tell yourself to develop this habit of noticing when your body is not fully breathing, and something as simple as extending the exhalation longer than the inhale. So you don't even need to learn fancy breathing.
Yeah.
Long, smooth inhale, and then have that exhalation longer will kick in the vagal brake, which will slow your heart down and tell your body it can shift more and more into that out of flight or fight, into the restorative stuff. It really is so important for us to be in our bodies and notice that what our bodies are experiencing.
It's magic. It really is magic, that breath.
Absolutely.
It's magic.
And
I don't know why it's so hard for us to remember it or build it in as a habit. Or maybe I'm just talking about myself, but it's magic. Every time I'm like, it works.
Well,
like,
if you went to your doctor and they reminded you, if you go to your therapist and they remind you, or if we had, sort of like, it's something that once you tune into the body channel and you practice being in it, it's like a lot harder to abandon it. And a lot of times under stress, and this is particularly true of women, we get steered out of the fight. We're more into the freeze and the fawn. And what we do is we dissociate even from our own awareness of our own bodies. So that's, we realize women, we're just not as safe in our bodies as men, through history, right?
Right.
So this is something that we can teach ourselves and prioritize, to be in tune with just noticing when your shoulders are up here, you're tight, just to remind yourself, long, smooth inhale, longer, smooth exhalation. In this moment, you are safe. And all the big trauma experts who deal with I'm talking about Bessel van der Kolk, I'm talking about Peter Levine, I'm talking about all the big ones. They say, teach people to feel safe in their bodies in the moment. In the moment. I'm sitting on the chair and I'm breathing. That's how I calm myself in the green room as I watched Kevin Bacon floating around. I was focused, before I went on to the Today Show, I was just in my body breathing. And when I went out there, I was just talking to Maria Shriver, and I was talking to Jessica Shepard, and I was just there. Yeah. Just in a conversation, connecting with people. And you know what? People are pretty cool.
People are pretty cool.
People are pretty good. And most people are really good people. We have to remember that. Yeah. Most people are going to do the right thing when it talks about taking care of somebody in their immediate,
100%
space. Yeah.
I believe that. If you could sort of send one message to women in the midlife transition, a myth to dispel, what would you share with them?
Think about this period of transition as an opportunity to get rid of what isn't working for you and prioritize yourself and your pleasure as a challenge and an opportunity.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Natalie. This is a lot of fun.
So much fun.